This minuscule shard of volcanic glass has appended 3 decades of accepted human evolutionary theory. Discovered deep within the ancient soils of Ethiopia, it serves as irrefutable evidence that our ancestors didn't merely endure the most catastrophic volcanic eruption in Earth's recent history, they actually evolved, innovated, and flourished while the world around them descended into chaos. Everything we thought we understood about one of humanity's darkest chapters has now been fundamentally overturned. Let me transport you to the very moment this discovery was made, inside a lab at the University of Texas, where paleoanthropologist John Kappelman and his research team were meticulously analyzing sediment samples from an archaeological site known as Shinfa Madama, located in the rugged, arid landscape of northwestern Ethiopia. Their mission: to identify cryptotephra-ultrafine particles of volcanic glass so impossibly small that they can only be detected through cutting-edge geochemical fingerprinting techniques. Finding these microscopic relics is the equivalent of searching for a particular needle in a vast field of hay without even knowing whether the needle exists at all. But here's why this discovery matters to you. Imagine being able to pinpoint the exact week your great-great-grandmother was born, but instead, the event in question happened over 74,000 years ago. That's the kind of mind-bending chronological accuracy this tiny glass fragment has unlocked. When they finally identified the volcanic material as originating from the Toba eruption, a cataclysmic event that dwarfs anything in modern human memory, every artifact layer surrounding it suddenly made sense. These strata told a story that defied all prior assumptions, one so extraordinary that it is now rewriting textbooks. Far from barely clinging to survival during Earth's greatest natural catastrophe, humans were thriving. The archaeological evidence at Shinfa Madama revealed an uninterrupted continuum of human activity both before and after the eruption, a direct contradiction to the widely accepted belief that the human population had been decimated to fewer than 1,000 breeding individuals. Imagine yourself on the shores of ancient Sumatra, where modern-day Lake Toba now rests. The ground beneath your feet trembles. The sky darkens. What follows is a geological event so violent, it renders every disaster movie ever made utterly tame. The Toba supereruption detonated with the energy equivalent of a nuclear bomb exploding every second for 2 consecutive weeks. To truly comprehend this scale, consider this: if you pressed play on a 336-hour video at the start of the eruption, you'd still be watching as it ended. Toba expelled 2,800 cubic kilometers of ash, pumice, and molten rock into the atmosphere, enough to blanket the entire state of California under a meter of volcanic debris. The volcanic explosivity index, which tops out at 8, was maxed out completely. For comparison, Mount St. Helens in 1980, rated a 5, Toba was over 1,000 times more powerful. If Mount St. Helens was a firecracker, Toba was a hydrogen bomb detonating without mercy. And yet, the eruption itself was only the beginning. A plume of ash soared 30 kilometers into the sky, triple the cruising altitude of modern airplanes. This ash cloud wasn't just a visual spectacle. It was the trigger for a global chain reaction. It released colossal quantities of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, forming a thick, sun-blocking veil that cooled the Earth dramatically. Rain cycles stalled, crops withered, food chains collapsed, and then came a revelation so haunting that even NASA scientists were forced to double-check their simulations. Sergei Osipov and his colleagues at King Abdullah University employed advanced NASA climate models to analyze what the Toba plume did to the ozone layer. What they found was chilling. The eruption didn't just block sunlight. It absorbed the specific ultraviolet radiation necessary for the natural production of ozone from atmospheric oxygen. The Earth's ozone layer, our planet's protective sunscreen, effectively vanished. In the tropics, ozone levels dropped by half. In some regions, they were completely obliterated for over a year. Imagine stepping outside and suffering a blistering sunburn within minutes. Fields scorched under sterilizing UV radiation. Oceanic ecosystems collapsed as unfiltered solar rays penetrated into the depths. Eye damage, skin lesions, and DNA-altering radiation became daily threats. The aftermath resembled the environmental fallout of a planet-wide nuclear war but stretched over many relentless months. And still, despite this horror, humanity persisted. More than that, they adapted and innovated. This is where the story turns astonishing. At sites across both Africa and Asia, all linked by identical chemical signatures of microscopic toba glass, archaeologists found that human populations didn't decline, they actually grew. At Pinnacle Point in South Africa, for example, human activity increased in frequency and complexity after the eruption. Let that sink in. During what should have been an extinction-level event, our ancestors were inventing, experimenting, and thriving. Back at Shinfa Madama in Ethiopia, the findings were even more revolutionary. When local rivers began to dry due to climate disruption, humans pivoted their subsistence strategies almost instantly. They abandoned land-based hunting and shifted toward aquatic diets, harvesting fish and shellfish with impressive skill. In the midst of this chaos, they pioneered early projectile weaponry, creating what is now the oldest confirmed evidence of bow and arrow technology in human history. These were not desperate survivors scraping by, they were masterful innovators using adversity as a crucible for invention. The most mind-blowing revelation came not from tools, but from chemical analyses of animal bones and ostrich eggshells. These tests revealed a dramatic shift toward arid, desert-like conditions following the eruption, exactly the kind of environment assumed to be uninhabitable. And yet, human adaptation was so effective, it suggests that populations not only endured, but possibly expanded. This finding torpedoed one of the longest-standing ideas in evolutionary biology, the Toba bottleneck hypothesis. For 30 years, scientists believed that Toba's eruption caused such devastation that the human species was reduced to fewer than 1,000 breeding pairs. This theory was supported by mitochondrial DNA studies in the 1990s that seemed to indicate a sudden contraction in genetic diversity. But then, in 2023, a research team from the Chinese Academy of Sciences analyzed the full genomes of more than 3,000 individuals from across the globe. What they found completely dismantled the bottleneck hypothesis. The actual population bottleneck occurred approximately 930,000 years ago, not during or after the Toba eruption. It's as if we discovered that the Titanic actually sank 62 years earlier than we thought. All our timelines, all our assumptions shattered. For more than 117,000 years, humanity was reduced to a population of just 1,280 reproductive individuals during a distant ice age, long before the Toba disaster. By the time the Toba volcano erupted, Homo sapiens had already endured and rebounded from near extinction. The idea that we were hanging by a thread 74,000 years ago, totally false. And here's the kicker. New data suggests that instead of waiting for lush green corridors of vegetation to appear during wet periods, humans began exploiting so-called blue highways, ephemeral streams, and seasonal water routes. As drought tightened its grip, our ancestors moved from one water hole to another, inadvertently laying down the first trails of global migration. These weren't just people surviving. These were pioneers forging the very paths that would later spread our species across continents. The behavioral flexibility that allowed humans to shift from hunting to fishing, to invent new tools, to navigate desolate landscapes, became the precise skill set needed for global expansion. Toba didn't wipe us out. It was the ultimate evolutionary boot camp. When we zoom out and view this entire saga with the clarity of modern evidence, the narrative is transformed. The Toba story is no longer a cautionary tale of near extinction. It is a triumphant testimony to the extraordinary resilience of the human species. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a powerful reframe of what we believe is possible. At a time when everything conspired to end us, volcanic darkness, lethal radiation, ecological collapse, small bands of humans adapted, improvised, and overcame. They devised new ways to feed themselves. They developed revolutionary hunting tools. They forged the migration paths that would one day populate every continent. Scattered across 3 continents, those microscopic slivers of volcanic glass now serve as silent witnesses to humanity's most defining trial. Against impossible odds, our ancestors proved what still defines us today. We are the most adaptable, inventive, and resilient species this planet has ever known. The worst time to be human turned out to be the moment we proved we were unstoppable.